So I started off by the very modest material called brick. Yeah, I think on most sites, brick does come into place, and it's the first material that you see on site that an architect takes a call whether that's a that's a uh, that's a that's a material or that's a quality that you would approve for. So we all need to understand that in our country, uh, brick is made in a not organized sector. It's not made in factories, right? Like a steel and a cement is made in a factory, and so there is not much for you to check. It comes packed, it comes unadulterated. Yeah, cement comes unadulterated, comes packed. Steel comes with a certificate. Yeah, so there's not much for you to check. What comes to check to a very large extent is sand and brick. Brick, as we all know, is made in the unorganized sector, right? Brick is made by a nomadic community, yeah, that goes from farms to farms, asking farmers to hand over their lands. Lazy farmers, most of the time, lazy farmers who do not want to, who want to make a quick buck and who do not want to continue with the agricultural tradition for a short term, for a very short term and for a myopic vision, hand over these lands to these nomadic tribes. These nomadic tribes cut over from the farm the topsoil. The entire topsoil of that farm is taken off and number of additives are put in it like sand, which adds to silica, coal powder, magnesium, and I do not, I'm sure if you've ever traveled outside Bombay in any of the directions, you will see brick kilns constructed and smoke coming out of the brick kilns. Yeah. So this goes through so the mud collected is sieved, is put in a pit, ingredients are mixed. The entire family works. There's a huge family of the nomadic tribe of other, yeah, it works only in the summer season. In the monsoon, there is usually a shortage of brick. He then able to sustain himself in the monsoon only by selling the brick that he has made in the kiln. Yeah, through the kiln over the summer months. So his wife, his children, everybody are involved, and they make the brick. Yeah, they make the wet brick, allow it to sun dry, then stack it in the kiln and put the kiln to fire. Yeah, that's the procedure of brick making. Yeah, in the kiln, because it is not a controlled firing of the kiln, some parts of the kiln but naturally burn well, some parts of the kiln do not burn well. Yeah, because the kiln is stepped up, right? The bricks are stepped up with the center of the kiln left, so to say, vacant to fire the kiln. So all kinds of fuel material like timber, coal powder, wood shavings, yeah, all that is put in, and for a week, at least for a week, the kiln is burnt, yeah, in order to bake the bricks. That's the way they bake the bricks. Yeah. And when the kiln is cooled after 7 days, the bricks are sorted. When you sort the bricks, you get usually three types of bricks. Yeah. The three types of bricks usually depend from, yeah, good quality bricks or well burnt bricks to underburnt bricks and overburnt bricks. Yeah, I hope you all are writing all this down or at least remembering this. Yeah, so usually the bricks around the fire are what are called as overburnt bricks. They are black in, they usually become black because they are in constant touch with the fire, and they are well burned, but for sure, but because of being overburned, they tend to become a little brittle. So they are a good brick, but they tend to be a little brittle. Similarly, underburnt bricks, because they are not burnt well, also tend to get brittle. Whereas a well burnt brick, yeah, does not tend to be brittle. It has certain qualities. Yeah, it has certain qualities, and those can be checked by an architect when he goes on site. So what is the kind of test an architect does when he's on site and he looks at the quality of a brick? He looks, so you've ordered around 10,000 bricks, 5,000 bricks. How do you check brick? Yeah, how do you check quality of brick? Yeah, so I'm going to ask some people, how does one check quality of brick, and how does an architect check the quality of a brick when he's on site? Sneha, are you there?
Yes.
Sneha, you have any idea how would you check a quality of a brick?
By dropping the brick from a certain height to check if it breaks or it maintains its shape.
Okay, so the first is that you pick the brick along its length. Yeah, so that if I take this mobile and consider it as my brick, I'll hold the brick at this one end, yeah, along the length, and I'll throw it. I'll throw it at a distance. I'll throw it at a distance of around 3 meters, 10 feet. I won't throw it like that, but I'll throw it just like this. Yeah, not forcefully, as if I'm throwing some. I don't need to throw it large distance. I just want it to go to a certain distance and land with impact. Yeah, and if the brick breaks on a very small impact, then but naturally it gives me an idea that it's either underburnt or overburnt. Right? Vruti, are you there? Vruti?
Yeah.
Vruti, can you suggest any other way by looking at the brick? Can you suggest what could be the quality of the brick by way of observation by an architect?
Maybe by clapping the bricks together.
Yes. So when you take two bricks and you ring them, when you hit them together, they say that if the brick is well made, if the brick is well made, right? If the brick is well made, is solid, is homogeneous, all right? Then there is a ringing sound. I'm sure you'll all come from physics background. You know what is a ringing sound. You must have done a tuning fork exercise. Yeah, things that are solid, well made, homogeneous, when banged together give a ringing sound. Yeah, so that's what they ask you to do. Yeah, Mahek, are you there?
Oh yeah.
Mahek, you have any idea what could be the another test to know which is a good for brick, good method to test bricks?
No. I knew
Okay.
about the height one.
Okay, okay. So the next is the idea is that what is the first of all what is the finish of the brick? Yeah. So that's before I throw it, I'd first observe the brick in hand. I'll observe the brick in hand to see what is the finish of a brick. An A1 brick or a first quality brick will not be deformed, will be neat, clean, with clean edges, good edges, is a first quality brick. Don't forget that when the brick is placed in the kiln, it is just sun dried. So it is in some sense wet. It is not entirely dried. It is not entirely hardened. Now where that brick is in the kiln, there is some pressure that is coming on the brick. Yeah, you're loading a brick on top of bricks, bricks on top of bricks in order to make up the kiln. So your brick is somewhere in between. There is some loading coming onto the brick. If your brick is not well dried, if your brick is soft in nature, then your brick will tend to get deformed. Yeah, your brick can become skewed. Yeah, your brick may not need not look nice, neat rectangle, which is very necessary for your construction process. If you want to use the brick in a wall and you're going to check the plumb and level of the wall, then the brick needs to have its surfaces well done. So that's the first appearance of the brick. Then the edges of the brick. The edges of the brick need to be good. While transporting, you have to understand bricks are thrown while they are transported. The guy down who's loading the brick to the guy on the truck who's loading the brick, bricks are thrown. And they have developed the art of throwing and catching bricks. As you throw and catch bricks, bricks tend to get damaged. So you have to find whether the edges are good. You should have neat, clean edges. Yeah. Most of the time we do not get first class bricks. First class bricks are found in Gujarat, areas of Gujarat. Yeah. Especially in and around Baroda, Ahmedabad, where the climate is much hot. It does not rain, and if you go to Baroda, anybody of you have been to Baroda, you'll find excellent brick buildings. Ahmedabad, if you all have visited Ahmedabad, you'll see beautiful brick buildings that Le Corbusier used in building them. Yeah, though she made a lot of brick buildings. That's because it doesn't rain a lot. The surface can afford to be dry. It does not catch moss. It does not catch humidity. And so using of the material works well in that. So industries there have developed in making what is called as controlled kilns, yeah, controlled brick making, and hence you can get what is called is A1 first quality brick. Yeah, in some parts of Gujarat. In Maharashtra, to a very large extent, we do not get first quality brick. We get what the brick that we get is second quality brick. Yeah, it's for so when you put an A first quality brick, second quality brick, the difference is vast difference. The A1 quality brick is like a terracotta brick. Have you ever seen a terracotta brick? Neat, clean, looks as if it is factory made. Yeah. While a normal brick, I'm sure you all have seen, a normal brick is in some sense rough. Yeah, has the frog and bulky. You rub your hand over it and your hand will get stained and stuff like that. So you'd have to understand whether you're working, but naturally, if you've not ordered a first quality brick, you're not going to get a first quality brick. You're going to get a second quality brick. You're going to check the edges. You're going to check the size. You're going to check its surfaces. The other thing that you can do as a test. So I've spoken about 3 tests till now. The first is appearance. The second is the impact. The third is the homogeneous or the ringing sound. The fourth is about its porosity and it's about its salt content. Don't forget, if a brick has a lot of salt content, when you use it in your construction, it is going to absorb the moisture from the air and you're going to find all those bubbles that you see in the paint. I'm sure people who stay on the ground floor have faced these problems where their walls, the paint in the walls always keep peeling up. There are always blisters on the wall. I'm sure you observed that. That's because of the poor quality brick used. That's because the brick had a lot of salt content, and as there is growth in moisture in the air, especially in these monsoon months, the brick tends to absorb that moisture. As it absorbs the moisture, moisture is not good for paint. So it throws out some of the moisture. Moisture is not good for paint, so it starts affecting the paint. Yeah. So you need to know what is the salt content in the brick. A very simple test for the salt content is that you dip the bricks in some water. Yeah. And not look at them immediately. Perhaps you come in the site, you see a brick, you take a brick and you put it in a drum of water. Couple of bricks in a drum of water. You finish your site visit. As you're leaving, you remove those bricks and see them. First of all, you'll gather what is the absorption of the water by the weight of the brick. Right? By the weight of the brick, by the weight of the brick. But naturally, if the brick has absorbed a lot of water, it's going to become real heavy. Sometimes the brick quality is so poor that it may just disintegrate in the water. Right? A lot of water to a brick can just disintegrate. And the third is, if there is a lot of salt content, you will see efflorescence. Yeah, you will see a lot of efflorescence on the, brick. You know what is efflorescence? Efflorescence is whitish salt that comes out on the top of the brick. Yeah, there's not much you can do, but you can at least judge to what extent is the salt content in the brick. If it is high, your brick will literally look whitish. Yeah, other than looking deep red because it has been soaked in water. So these are some 4 tests that you can conduct as an architect on site. Ishan Desai, are you there on?
Yeah.
Okay. Can you summarize the 4 points?
The first is the appearance of the brick and how the edges are. The second is the impact test, which you throw from a level to see whether it stands the impact. The third is to see if the brick is homogeneous in nature, and the fourth is to check the porosity and the salt content of the brick.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Okay. Anybody has any doubts? Raise a hand. Okay, otherwise, I'll go to the next material. Next very commonly used material is sand. Yes, someone has. Sarthak. Don't bug me
Yes.
up. I'm not in great mood. Yeah, tell me.
Yeah,
Tell
what
me.
about like what happens if the salt content is more, except for the white residue? Does it affect in the, like, does it get more brittle or anything like that?
No, the salt content, I told you, if salt content is more, it will first of all absorb more water, and it will give you problems later on. It will give you problems later on because the brick in the wall is always going to be there, and it's going to absorb the moisture from nature, moisture from the air. So the problems that we usually see, as I told you, efflorescence that happens in the walls is because of the 2 things. One is that it allows water to come up. Suppose why does it not happen on the upper floors? Why does it happen only on the ground floor? So first of all is that the brick, if it is in contact with the earth, or if you have not done what is called as a damp proof course. Have you heard of this, Sarthak, damp proof course?
Yes, it is in the plinth,
It is
like
at the
near
plinth.
plinth.
Yeah, so it's at the plinth level. At the plinth level, if you do a good damp proof course, that only stops the moisture from coming into the brick. Right? So in some sense, that's why, so most places where you see efflorescence or peeling of paint on the ground floor flats is not because the brick quality is entirely bad. Brick quality bad on the first floor also should absorb water and efflorescence, but that doesn't take place. It takes place on the ground floor because it is also allowing what is called as capillary action of water. So from the foundation or from the ground, the water is rising and it comes up to the window level. The window acts as a break. So up to the window, the water rises, and that's why you're also finding the efflorescence being reflected in the paint. But naturally, the brick is allowing for the moisture to rise. Yeah, that's largely because of the salt content. That's largely because of the porosity of the brick. But also, if you cut off the moisture level by giving a good damp proof course, you would have helped solving half the problem that is there. But beyond that, most bricks are going to be heavy on salts because you are not making a controlled mixture while producing bricks. Bricks are not made in the factory. If you make brick in the factory, you'd be able to control its constituents. You're not able to control its constituents because it's made in the open, it's made out of soil. Yeah, it's made with impurities around, so salt content is going to be high. Anybody else?
One more question.
Tell me.
Yeah. So in Gujarat there are good quality bricks. So is it only because of the high temperature they are capable, like, of making good quality bricks?
No, the high temperature has nothing to do with the brick. High temperature, I said, is because bricks, you have to understand, the quality of a brick will be made based on the market. Their exposed brickwork is a market. Most architects there, or few architects there, do build brick buildings with exposed brickwork. So there's a market. There's a market for A1 quality brick. Here, nobody builds buildings with exposed brickwork. Yeah, because you don't have a market, people are not producing A1 quality bricks because it's expensive. There is a market of producing brick faced or exposed brick buildings. And so people are producing it. It has nothing to do with the heat. The production, the kiln work is all happening in a controlled environment. Yeah, like there is something called as linear kilns, where the bricks are passed through like a factory process. The heating is done not in the outside like a kiln that we see on our outskirts. Here it is done in a shed. So the heating is done gradually. So, but naturally the quality of the brick is much better. The bricks are what are called as wire cut bricks, not mold bricks. A second quality brick is made from a mold, right? You know what is a mold? A timber mold in which the mud is placed, compacted, and then the mold allows the brick to fall off. There the edges are always going to be rough. In a wire cut brick, you're using wires. You're using a mold, a metallic mold through which the brick comes out. The edges are crisp. The edges are sharp. So depending upon the market, tomorrow if in some parts of Maharashtra extensively a complete township is made out of exposed brickwork, perhaps a company will start making first quality bricks, and you can also procure first quality brick. So we need to understand where there is a market from years together. Ahmedabad, Baroda has been a market for first quality bricks, exposed brickwork for the last 50-60 years now. And that's why that market is stable there. And here we have not been doing so because of our humid weather, because of our heavy rainfall. We have no option than to plaster our walls to give protection to our walls. And so the difference, yeah. So most people here who want to use exposed brickwork have no option than to get bricks from Baroda. Yeah. Anybody else? Any other questions? Good. The questions were very relevant for once. Yes. Nirav, you want to say something?
There is a question in the comments. Are there any compressive tests for bricks?
Yes, yes. There are compressive tests for bricks also. Yes. But as an architect, I do not know to what extent that can help you. First of all, I'll be truthful and say, I do not know what a compressive test is. I'll have to check a Rangwala or a specification book to check what should be the compressive stress. Yes, there are compressive stress for a brick, for which your brick needs to go to a lab. Clearly, the brick has to go to a lab. This cannot be done on site by an architect. So yes, if you'd want a compressive stress for a brick, you send to a lab and soon take a decision not to make the building in brick, because I'm sure it is going to fail in the lab. Yeah. So you will have to make another choice of. So most of the time, because we do not get very good quality brick, some people are also very concerned about where this brick is coming from. As I told you, bricks are an ecological damage, major ecological damage. I just told you in brief that a farm that has given away its topsoil to make brick, that farm is redundant for good. That farm is redundant for good. That farmer can never ever do agriculture anymore, because his topsoil, which is the productive part of the soil, is lost for a very short-term gain. For a very, very short-term gain. In one season, he'll blow that money up, but he's lost the farm forever. So people are now discouraging the buying of brick. Yeah. In order to give a clear picture that brick is not something that we intend to promote. We do not intend to promote buying of brick. So today people are adopting various other types of blocks and bricks. And for that, this question of going in for compressive strength becomes very much viable. Like in the building that I am staying, the buildings that in my colony are all made from cement blocks. How does it help me in making cement blocks? Cement is equally energy intensive. But then how do I use making cement block? Cement block, you have to understand, if I design the cement block well, yeah, that means if I make a good mold, I can have a large cement block which is completely hollow. So I can make hollow cement blocks. Yeah, thereby using minimum material, getting maximum through its form. Yeah, so if I make a big cement block with partitions inside, yeah, like with divisions inside, which is called as a cellular block, cellular or what you called as a perforated cellular, yeah, hollow block, hollow concrete block. Perforated cellular hollow concrete block. If I make something like that, then the actually thickness of my block is hardly anything. Yeah, maybe half an inch. Yeah, maybe 12 mm thickness of the block. Yeah, but the block size may be large, so I'm not filling in material in the entire block. I do not make my block heavy. Though my block is large, my block is not heavy because it has got internal partitions. Yeah, it's hollow, it's cellular, cells are there. So I have internal partitions that give the strength to the block, use minimal material in the block, and more important of all, give me a larger mass of a block than a brick. Yeah, and more important of all, so I'm making good use of my intellect by using a factory product like cement, sand, doing production on site, thereby giving my labor work. Yeah, you can imagine the construction work takes place during the day. In the evening, I hand over to my labor that I want so many blocks made. So in the evening, if they want to add, if they want to make an additional buck, they work through the evening as overtime and make additional blocks, cure the blocks over a period of 7 days, 10 days. And then I can send that block for compression test. And yes, I can exactly know what is the compression test I want for the wall, because that's important. These are hollow blocks. They better be good. I cannot afford to have a hollow block and a defective block. It's double whammy. I wouldn't want to do that. I'd want a good block that is hollow, lightweight, as well as strong. In that case, I need to send a block for compression test, but naturally, there would be a compression test that is there. So whoever has asked that question, who's asked that question?
It's me, Sarth.
Sarth, next time, can you please brief us of what is the compression stress that is required for blocks, all kinds of blocks, bricks and blocks?
Yeah, I'll search about it.
Yeah, next time you can inform us. Yeah, what kind of bricks are used for exposed brick construction? I just told you, exposed brick construction, a first class wired brick, cut bricks. Yeah, Nirav has already answered that. Thank you. Anybody else with any other query with regards to concrete blocks? So not only concrete blocks is one option. There are so many other options. Yeah, like blocks these days are extensively made out of what is the, I'm losing the word. What is the sludge that comes out of the cement plants?
Fly ash.
Fly ash. Yes, good. Thank you. Fly ash. A lot of fly ash is used as a bonding material and as a waste material to make bricks. A lot of fly ash is used as a bonding material to make bricks. Yeah, it's a waste material. Cement companies, iron ore factories want it to be picked up daily. Yeah, so people who are indulging in brick making pick up fly ash and have a good mix between cement and fly ash, thereby cutting down on the consumption of cement to a very large extent. So fly ash is a very good option. Then I have straw blocks. A lot of hay is compressed to make what are called as straw blocks. I have what are called as rice husk blocks. These are all waste. All kind of waste can be used to make blocks. Yeah. And as far as you have a good mold, which is very easily available in the market, which gives you either compact or perforated and hollow blocks. You can actually do production on your site, thereby giving your own labor additional income and cutting down this bad practice of eating up of topsoil in the fields by way of asking for ready-made bricks. Yeah, is this clear to everybody? Anybody has any other query? Anybody has query? Yes, Sarth will give us some compressive stress figures next time. Yeah, can we go ahead? Is there anybody with any other query? The next material that needs to be looked out for. Yeah. Rishiraj, you joined the. Is aerated concrete ball also used? Yes, aerated concrete block is also used. Now, whether if you want to keep aerated concrete block is called as Siforex blocks. You must have heard of this, Siforex blocks. A compound of aluminium is added to the concrete block that makes the block fluffy and light. You must have heard of Siforex blocks. Siforex blocks are what you called as aerated concrete blocks. Their weight of the concrete block is 1/3 of that of the normal block. So if I want to make lightweight partition somewhere, good question. Lightweight partition somewhere where I don't have a beam below, I yet want to make a wall. Yeah, and I do not want to cause unwanted loads, then I use what is called as an aerated concrete block, or the company name is called Siforex. So I'll use Siforex blocks. Yeah. Rishiraj Pujari, are you there? Rishiraj Pujari. Yeah, can I go ahead? So the next material, if there is no other query, you can always put the query in the chat box. I can always clear them later. The next material that we need to look out for is sand. Sand today is a bigger problem than any other material on a construction site. Yeah, on a construction site today, sand is one of the biggest problems. Yeah. And sand can cause most of the impurities in any of the construction that we do, be it in cement mortar, be it in concrete. Yeah, these days large ready-mix concrete factories have stopped using sand and are depending on what is called as stone dust. Yeah, fine particles of stone that are washed that can give the property of a sand. So I hope you know what does sand do. Sand in some sense acts as a filler. It imparts strength to cement. Yeah, sand allows the cement to wrap around its particle. Yeah, there's something called as bulking of sand. If water is put up to a certain right proportion, it gives strength to the cement. It also acts as a filler. In concrete, sand adhered along with cement enters all the pores of the concrete, thereby making the concrete good, or making the concrete strong, or holding the stone particles together, thereby giving the name to concrete as artificial stone. So sand plays a very, very important role in construction. A good quality sand can make all the difference. A bad sand can create a lot of problems. Yeah. So what is a good quality sand? And what do I mean by bad quality sand? So good quality sand is one who has minimum organic material in it. Yeah. Minimum organic material in it and minimum impurities by way of dust and soil. Yeah. So if a heap load of sand comes on site, yeah, you'll immediately know whether the sand is of good quality or not. How do you do that? Yeah, Can anybody tell me how does one check good quality sand on site?
They usually have these large sieves through which the sand is poured.
No, sir. That only allows me to use the better part of the sand for plaster and stuff like that. The bigger part of the sand I'm removing. That does not allow me to, yeah, to a certain extent the mud comes off from the sand. But initially, just on site, if I go, the very easy method to check whether there is mud on site is to put your hand in the sand and remove it. If the sand is of good quality, sand will not stick to your palm. Sand will fall off. But if there is mud, a lot of mud in the sand, then your hands are bound to get stained with mud. Right? You're going to find mud on your hands. Yeah. So if you find a lot of silt, a lot of mud on your hands, then you have to perhaps order what he's rightly saying is not only sieving of the sand, but also washing of sand. So I do not know if you've ever been on site where sand is washed. Yeah, there are drums. Yeah, and regularly the sand is sprayed with water such that the mud comes off the sand and the sand is free of mud. Then, as he rightly said, sieves are there, various sieves are there in order to remove the right kind of sand for the kind of work that I have to do. Like if I have to do a very plain plaster, then I'll want the finest sand to come out of it. If I have what is called as a pebble dash plaster, pebble dash. Have you seen plasters that have pebble-like feeling on top of the plaster? Pebble-like, yeah. Then that is called as a pebble dash plaster. Then, but naturally, I want the pebbles to come out. I want the heavier part of the sand to come out separately, because in the second coat of the plaster, I'd like to put those pebbles. I'd like to take a sponge and get the pebbles to get exposed, or to get the pebbles to come out, or get the pebbles identified clearly. So I'll do what is called as a pebble dash plaster. Yeah, all kinds of things. And that's why sieving of the sand is very important. Yeah, these days there is a big problem about how sand like cement, like brick, sand is also procured in a questionable manner. Today, wherever we are getting sand from the outskirts of Bombay is procured in a very, very questionable manner. Most of the sand is pumped out from the river beds. Yeah, sand usually is expected from the river beds. Yeah, the Vaitarna River on the western coast is the largest production of sand. You want sweet water sand. You do not want salt in the sand. Yeah. So the way the sand is pulled out is questionable. These people pull out sand using pumps. Earlier, it's a harmful way of getting sand out. A diver goes into the ground, takes a barge into the middle of the river, small rivers like the Vaitarna. He takes the barge in the middle of the river, yeah, and he dips below the riverbed and goes down with a basket and gets the sand from the riverbed and he empties it out onto the barge. The barge has provisions such that the water comes out and the sand remains there. He does this a number of times. These people who go down to pull sand out are really strong, to be able to dive way below the riverbed and to dive way below to the riverbed and to be able to fill a basket full of sand and to come up again, pull it up again and empty it onto the barge. Tough job. And that's why the price of sand has now rocketed through the roof now. Yeah, sand is really expensive. Yeah, these people are now using pumps. So, but naturally you don't get the kind of people to go do all these exercises. So they have heavy duty pumps where they put their pipes way into the ground, thereby allowing the river water along with the sand to come up. They do it anywhere, everywhere. They do it around the foundations of the bridges. Yeah. Thereby creating difficulties. So they've literally eaten around the foundations of the bridges that cross over the Vaitarna River. And so there is a constant check on them to see where they are dredging for sand. The bridges that come from along the Western Express Highway also are not in great shape. So trucks that are full of sand are weighing the most. They have wet sand in them. You can imagine a truckload of wet sand is like double the weight that it would be actually dry. And these people wet the sand such that the mud quality comes off, the mud and the silt comes off. So before the truck is dispatched, they fill the truck with sand and then they put in a lot of water. They put in a lot of water, first of all, to swell the sand. That adds to the additional quantity that they can cut across. And then as the truck moves, the silt along with the water falls off, thereby making the sand clean. So that when it is delivered on site, they can boast that the sand is clean and is not filled with silt. These are the kind of problems we're seeing. Now they are going right till the delta areas where the rivers meet the ocean, and they're pulling sand from there. But naturally, when sand comes from there, there's a lot of salt that comes into the sand. So, but naturally, one test is to put your hand into the sand and check out the mud quantity in the sand. The other is that after a couple of days, the sand that is dumped on your site dries in the sun. Yeah, when the sand comes onto your site, it is wet. As I told you, it is wet and sand. So the sand looks fresh. The sand looks clean. But once the sand starts drying in the sun, you will see the white layer that comes onto the sand. And that talks about the salt quality in the sand. And that gets you to decide whether you need to wash the sand both for its silt content, also for its salt content. So washing of sand on site is a common practice, considering the poor quality of sand that is coming on our sites. Poor quality sand can again cause similar problems that we spoke about in brick. That is, create kind of efflorescence. Yeah, absorb moisture and give out the moisture at the wrong time, thereby affecting the quality of the work that is conducted. Yeah. Nowadays, yeah, the big practice is that sand comes packed again. Sand comes packed from far off areas. A lot of sand is again coming from areas in Rajasthan and Gujarat. Yeah. Small bags of sand, of white sand or whitish sand. Yeah. There they have a lot of whitish or light colored sand, very fine sand, which is not good in some sense also. A very fine sand is not good because it does not give as a good filler. It makes the sand mortar very liquidy because the quality of the sand is very fine. But the sand quality is really good because it has very little impurities in it. Yeah, they come packed as bags, they come in train containers, and builders and developers buy entire containers and get them on site to ensure good quality. Otherwise, depending on sand in our outskirts, it's a difficult endeavor to get, and there is no assurance for quality. So if you look at our building construction process, more than 50% of the carbon footprint that is created in the world today is because of the construction process. either in the exercise of building or in the exercise of procuring material for building. So if you look at brick, if you look at sand, cement, steel, all of these are hugely energy intensive materials. They create extensive carbon footprints. They create extensive pollution in the production. Yeah. You're in the field now. There's very little you can do to get out and change the world. But a good knowledge on your materials, like opting for materials that can cut down on energy consumption. Yeah, like we spoke about fly ash bricks, like we spoke about, rice husk bricks, straw bale bricks, all these kind of alternative materials. A lot of alternative materials can help, in being sensitive in the way we build. Minimalist way of building, or be able to question how you're building or what you're building with is also the other way of being responsible in the way you build. To what extent you'd like to use sand? Can sand be replaced with stone dust? So today a lot of sand is being replaced by stone dust. A lot of stone is cut. So again, aggregates that make concrete are also cut to a very large extent from mountains. And when stone is cut from mountains and causing ecological damage, stone powder is created or stone dust is created. These fine particles of stone are equally neutral, lack organic matter in them, and can be used as a filler in especially concrete mortars. So does anybody have questions for sand? Quality of sand, availability of sand. Anybody has any queries? Do we see in the chat box? But now it's illegal to use the river sand, right? It is not illegal. I wouldn't say it is illegal. It is not illegal, but its supply is restricted. It's not illegal. If you have sand on site, it's not illegal. You have to do construction. How can you do construction? But they've created a shortage. They've created a shortage for sand, thereby getting the price of sand to go up, thereby leading to people to look out for alternatives. Yeah. This is the age of alternatives. So if you know that sand is not easily available, then but naturally someone who is largely into the construction process will start looking for alternatives. So there has to be an alternative to sand. Yeah, there are now ready mix plasters. Yeah, so there are companies who are making ready plasters so that you don't have to depend on sand. The company itself procures sand from a reliable source, gives you the right kind of certification by way of quality, thereby cutting down your dependency on sand to a very large extent. Okay, he's got the approvals to procure sand from a right. So it's not illegal. The way they transport sand to a very large extent is becoming illegal. Yeah, especially with the kind of infrastructure problems that we have. When these truck drivers drive around, when the sand truckers, they're the worst of the drivers. Yeah, if you're a regular driver on the highways, you know not to indulge with them. Yeah, you can't indulge with them. They're driving daily in and out. They have driven all night. Most of the sand comes onto your site at night 2 o'clock, morning 3 o'clock. No sand comes in the day hours. Yeah. Like I have clients who are complaining, oh, we lost our sleep. The sand truck came in at 1 o'clock and was emptying the truck till 3 o'clock. How could you do something like this? How could you do something like that? I said, that's the way it is. You want it, you have to bear with it. Yeah. So it is controlled. It's a controlled way of It's a controlled way of supply, and there are shortages created. You know, when there is shortage, then but naturally there will be a hike in price. Hike in price will lead to corruption and all kinds of things. So you need to look out for alternatives, and that is there. If sand contains too much salt, then is it good or bad? Of course it is bad. Salt in anything is bad, including in your food. Yeah. So salt will always attract moisture and cause efflorescence. Yeah. Efflorescence. Efflorescence will always, that's excess water. So sand will absorb water. When it gets dry, it will give out that water. That water, when it will come out, will cause the kind of things that you don't want. Damp walls, yeah, damp walls, damp floors, yeah. Salt over a period of time will corrode the metal, all kinds of things. So salt is bad, but naturally you'd want to build salt free to whatever extent that is there. The only way to do that is get the sand washed to a certain extent to get rid of its silt as well as sand. Anybody, anything else? So before going into other materials, I've spoken for an hour now. I'm going to get another half an hour from other people in about writing certain specifications, right? So I'd like to start with, so I'm going to ask you to write certain specifications. So suppose if, suppose tomorrow I start suppose I have to write the specifications of a site. Yeah. Suppose I have to write the specifications of a site. I'd want to understand how I start organizing my bill of quantities. I'll start arranging the bill of quantities, that is. So last time I spoke about, yeah, just site management. Yeah, site management. So in site management, I would have 2 to 3 things. One is clearing of site. Last time I spoke, yeah, that, but naturally now you need to use your notebooks. Yeah, the notebooks that I've been asking you is to start writing now the procedure of how various materials would be used, how you'd write your specification, and how you'd organize your bill of quantities. So the first would be perhaps organizing your site. You'd organize the site by way of couple of things. The first would be clearing of site. Yeah, we spoke about that. The next would be barricading the site. Yeah. So, Athira, are you there?
Yeah, I'm here.
Athira, what would you understand by way of barricading a site?
Setting the boundary of where.
Why would you want to barricade a site?
To keep to keep all the materials within the site so that nobody else comes in, or to know the boundary of where the structure is going to be built.
To make the site safe.
Yeah.
First of all, you barricade a site in order for safety purposes. So what is the material usually you've seen for barricading of a site? Have you ever seen a site barricaded?
I've seen in some places I've seen they keep poles around and then cover it with like a cloth mesh kind of thing.
No, that's not barricading. That cloth is done for, that is done when you are dismantling, and you as good as not barricaded a site. Barricading of site, usually you do it with metal sheets. Have you not seen metal sheets?
Yeah.
Metal sheet barricading, metal sheet. The cloth that is there is just Hyson cloth that does not allow the stone or fine particles to come onto the road. Not that kind of barricading. I'm talking about barricading of your site such that there is a gate. Nobody walks into your site without the formal compound wall built. So how would you write the specification of a barricading? For a barricading, how would I provide barricading for site? So now we have to write specification. Suppose you want the contractor to quote for a barricading of a site.
Okay.
So how would you write?
We would need the like for the metal sheet we would need the number of metal sheets required to cover the site. So the area, I mean the area of the site, and
So you need to first understand, you have to write. So providing and fixing of site barricading. So I hope everybody is writing now. You need to write providing and fixing of site barricading by way of providing MS framework. So, but naturally the sheet is going to be put on an MS framework, right? So MS framework, MS framework and MS or galvanized iron sheets, up to a height of whatever height. What height would you prefer?
2.5 meters.
Yeah, anything above? Yeah, anything above 2.5 meters. Anything above 2.5 meters. Yeah, up between 2.5 to 3 meters. Yeah, to enclose the site along with appropriate doors for ingress and outgress, right? Yeah, everybody clear? So providing and fixing of site barricade by way of providing an MS framework on which galvanized iron or MS powder coated sheets are attached up to a height of 2.5 to 3 meters with appropriate arrangement for ingress and outgress by way of doors. Yeah, clear to everybody? Yeah, next item. Komal Agarwal.
Yeah.
Komal Agarwal, the next item would be excavation.
Okay.
How would you write the specification for an excavation?
Providing for excavation on the site up to a given depth.
That's it. So excavation is based on two factors. One is shallow excavations, one is deep excavations. Yeah. So as you rightly said, shallow excavations go up to 2.5. Yeah. Between 2 and 2.5 meters deep. Deep excavations go beyond 2.53 meters deep. Yeah. But excavations have another two conditions that you missed out. First is that you said yes, providing for excavation of foundation up to a depth of whatever 1.82 meters depth, thereby making provisions for shoring. You know what is shoring? You don't want the earth to keep falling down, right? So you want him to dig and you want it to remain that way. So you do some kind of shoring in order to see that the mud stays in place. And the next is to pump additional water out. Arrangements for pumping of water out. When I'm going to go down to cast the foundations or build the strip foundations, I do not want water down there. If I want water down there, all the laying of my concrete below is going to get mixed in the water and get diluted, right? So I want the site to be dry, and so I will put what are called as submersible pumps to keep pumping water out continuously. So I'll have two types of excavations, shallow excavations, deep excavations. Yeah. Shallow excavation will allow me to deep up to a certain depth. Yeah. Along with provide for shoring as well as continuous pumping of water. Yeah. Wallaby?
Yes.
What according to you is the lowermost layer of a foundation?
The PCC bed.
Very good. So how would you write the specification of a PCC bed?
Providing and
Providing for what is the thickness of the bed according to you?
150 mm.
Yes, exactly. Providing for 150 mm of what would be the mix of concrete?
PC 1:2. I'm not sure actually.
Yeah. So M200. Yeah. So you'll be perhaps, yeah. M1, it will be somewhere between M150 and M200. So there is an assignment to be done for next time. For everybody, there is an assignment to be done for next time, a research on concrete. Everybody is going to do a reading on concrete and come next time because I'm going to ask questions on concrete. One is what are the various mixes of concrete? Yeah, like I just spoke about M150. Yeah, as we go ahead, concrete mixes become M250, 200, 250, 300, 400, stuff like that. What does that mean? What does M150 or 100 or 200 mean? The other is what are the various tests for good concrete? So there's something called as a slump test. Like brick, there is a compression test. Yeah. So everybody is to read on concrete and come. What is a good quality concrete? Yeah. And concretes are given in ratio. So what is M150 according to you? You have any idea? What is the mix of concrete? No. So an M150 is a ratio mix of 1:2:4. Vallabi, can you tell me what is 1:4?
Cement, sand, aggregate.
Yeah. So 1 is cement, 2 sand and 4 aggregate. That was the normal mix earlier. Yeah. 1:4 M150 was the normal mix earlier for all our concrete works. Yeah. Yeah. So now we have changed that after the new earthquake code, our new mix of concrete has become 1, 1.5, 3, thereby making the concrete stronger. So below in the PCC, you need not put even 1:4. You can put a concrete mix of 1:3:6 or a 1:4:8 of ratio. Yeah, why are you putting concrete in the ground? Can anybody tell me why? Vallabi, can you tell me why do you want to spread concrete in the ground, below the ground?
The foundation needs to be strong.
By putting a little bit of concrete, how you're going to make it strong? The foundation itself is going to be strong. The initial concrete, this is lean concrete. You know what is lean concrete? Lean, very poor quality concrete. So what is this lean concrete? How is this lean concrete helping you by spreading it below the ground?
So that it's leveled.
Exactly. So first of all, it gives me a good area to work on. So I've made like a platform or a clean surface on which I can tie my steel, make the foundation. You know how footings come about, right? You've seen footings. So how footings come about? Yeah. So for that you need a base. You need a good base. Tomorrow, if there is any kind of knee-jerk kind of a knee-jerk kind of a vibration, then that will take the first hit. The lean concrete will take the first hit. But most important of all, it really creates a good bed. It creates a good surface for me to start working upon. I don't have to pour my footing concrete on ground because the ground will absorb most of the cement content. I'd like to work on an impervious surface, which is the concrete bed that is being made. Yeah, clear? Clear? Yeah. So Divit Ahuja, are you there?
Yes.
Divit.
Yes. Yes.
David, what would
Yes.
be, yeah. So once I lay the PCC, what is the next thing that I would like to work on?
Footing, foundation.
Yes, foundations. Yeah, I hope everybody is writing the step-by-step ways of going about it. So what would be laid in the foundation first?
First we will put this scaffolds, and then steel would be laid, and then we will pour the concrete in.
Okay. So here in your BOQ, when you make a BOQ, now you're going to make two parts to the BOQ. So the first part of the BOQ is excavation, and PCC laying was all part of the subterranean works. Okay. Now all concrete works will come separately, steel will come separately. Yeah, it doesn't make a damn difference whether you're doing the steel below the ground, above the ground, on the 10th floor. Doesn't make a damn difference. Steel is given in kilos, it has nothing to do with you. But concreting, yes. Concreting cast below the ground is of a different rate as compared to concreting cast above the ground. Concreting cast for slab is different. Concreting cast for columns are different. Concreting cast for features are different. Can you tell me why, Divit? Why every concreting rate will be different?
Because of the compressive strain it has to take and the load to
No,
transfer
sir.
to the.
No, sir. No. No, give it one more try. It's not because of the loading. All concrete members will preferably be of the same mix. The mixes don't change. Except for the PCC, the mixes, once I start reinforced concrete, RCC, the mix doesn't change. You can't afford to have some things of lighter mix and some things of heavier mix. No. Once the mix decided by the engineer, the mix remains constant. It's not because of the mix, it's because of something else. Any idea?
Quit zones.
No. A change in rate in the concrete will depend upon the shuttering, the labor of the shuttering, the material used in the shuttering. Suppose I am doing something very intricate, yeah, like thin chhajjas, yeah, like ornate bands in concrete, then the amount of material that is going to go in the shuttering part of it is going to be large. I'll have to make all kinds of arrangement, cut the shuttering, fix it, make line level, lot of magajmari. Yeah, lot of effort in getting certain shutterings in place because you've designed the building you want those elements to be seen. Like if I do exposed concrete surface. You've seen exposed concrete surfaces. You have those lines, clear lines. You have the bolt marks. Have you seen that, Divit?
Yes, and in Louis Kahn's work.
Yes, the exposed concrete work costs more because there are drawings that are provided by the architect that is actually saying that exposed concrete needs to be looked in this particular way. It needs to have these lines at these distances. That means he has to cut the shuttering, he has to cut plies. He can't use anything anywhere and build. He has to be very specific in the way he uses things. Yeah. So in that sense, like a staircase, suppose he has to make a staircase, a dog-legged staircase where every thread and riser is articulated. Yeah. then the effort going in making that staircase by way of shuttering is much more, both by way of material as well as by way of labor. Don't forget, a lot of cost in the concrete is based on the shuttering material, like slabs. If I want to cast as many slabs, they may not cost a lot because a slab is made out of shuttering, that is of plates that are repeated, constantly repeated, right? Metal plates that are fixed one beside the other and are repeated. Not an issue. But if I have to make intricate chhajjas, intricate projections, then I'll have to get ply, cut it, put it, use it. Perhaps those members may not, those features may not be repetitive. If they are not repetitive, then that ply goes to waste. So feature-wise, the cost of concrete varies. Like casting concrete as foundation is the cheapest of the lot because I don't need any shuttering. When I cast the footing, all I need is some very basic shuttering to cast the foot. Very basic. And a lot of concrete is poured in it. There is barely any shuttering in the footing. So the cost of cubic meter per concrete for footings is bare minimum, or is the cheapest of the lot. That also means that I cannot compute all the concreting together. I cannot compute concrete footings vis-a-vis concrete columns, vis-a-vis concrete beams, vis-a-vis concrete slabs, vis-a-vis concrete staircases, vis-a-vis concrete bands. I cannot compute all of them together under one head. They will always be under various heads. So concreting is the next section and they are going to come under various different heads. Clear? Yeah. Is this clear to everybody? Has anybody not understood? Kindly raise your hand. Anybody not understood anything particularly? Yeah. So concreting rates are different for different items. That's largely because of the labor. That's largely because of the shuttering material that goes into it. Yeah. It largely goes into the making of it. Yeah. So intricate members require more shuttering, more labor, and so hence the cost. So the first item in concreting works will be casting of concrete footings. And you'd have to calculate trapezoid, volume of a trapezoid. I hope everybody knows how to calculate the volume of a trapezoid. When we are together, we can do that, or you can simplify it and make it volume of a cuboid. Yeah. We all know that footings are rectangular footings. So we can calculate the volume. So concrete is calculated in volume. PCC is calculated in volume. So all this is calculated in cubic meter. Earth excavation is calculated in cubic meter. Yeah. Except for barricading. Barricading was calculated in square meter. The amount of barricading construction was in square meter. Beyond that, excavation, both small, short excavations or shallow excavations and deep excavations are, it's the volume of mud that I'm excavating out. Entire volume of mud. It's calculated in cubic meter. Casting of PCC at the lowermost level is calculated in cubic meter. Casting of the footing is calculated in cubic meter. Yeah. Then you have all the various items. Yeah. So Zoya, are you there?
Yeah.
What would be the next item on the concrete list that you would want to calculate?
The plinth.
No, it doesn't. Footing comes up. What comes up above the footing?
The ram, the earth, and then the plinth and the DPC.
So footing. After the footing comes what is called as a stub column. Are you aware of a stub column that comes up to the plinth level?
No, I haven't heard.
You've not seen a footing? You've not seen a footing come up with a stub column?
Yeah. I mean,
What are you saying? Yeah, no.
I
Have you
have
seen
but
have
maybe
you
not
seen
heard the word stubbed.
uh,
Maybe not heard the word stubbed.
so do you know that a footing at low level into the ground is followed by a column, part of a column
Yeah, yeah,
that
yeah,
comes up to the plinth level?
yeah.
That's called a stub column,
Okay.
right? That is
Yeah.
cast below the ground. You don't cast the entire footing, that entire depth that you have dug, right?
No.
Footing is something small below.
Yeah.
What is the footing? You have any idea? Footing is calculated on what idea? On what basis? Any idea?
Uh, so it is taken the twice of the like the base of the footing. So it depends on the soil bearing capacity, and the uh, base of the footing is taken twice the thickness, the width of the column.
No, dear. So you mix two things up. You're right in certain extent, but you mix two things up. 2T, twice the depth of the wall plus 300. 2T plus 300 was
Yeah.
the rule applied for what is called as a strip foundation. You remember that?
Yeah.
That's a load-bearing strip foundation where the entire wall goes below the ground and steps out, right?
Yeah.
And as it steps out, it is expected that the foundation should be a minimum of twice the thickness of the wall plus the 300 of the PCC bed below, right?
Yeah.
In concrete footings, it doesn't happen like that. I hope you understand the difference between a concrete footing vis-a-vis a strip foundation.
Yeah.
Do you know the difference between the two?
No, last year we mainly focused on load bearing, like in the first year and most of
So
the
you have to
second year.
understand, in load bearing, all the walls go below the ground, right?
Yeah.
All the walls that I build on the ground floor go below the ground and have their own individual strip foundation. You have heard of that.
Yeah.
It doesn't work like that in concrete.
So every
In
column
concrete,
has its own footing.
every column goes down and has its own footing. And every column is joined by what is called as a plinth beam, right?
Yeah.
And the walls come now on the plinth beam, thereby restricting the wall to go into the ground, right?
Yeah.
So every column has its own foundation called as a footing. Is this clear to everybody? Yeah,
Yes.
we'll take questions later on. And so we need to understand that every column that goes below the ground has a footing. And as you rightly said, the size of a footing is not double the size of the column. The size of the footing depends upon the load of the column divided by the soil bearing capacity.
Yeah.
So the area of the footing is equal to load of the footing divided by soil bearing capacity. So the size of the footing is inversely proportional to the soil bearing capacity or the quality of the soil. If the soil quality is very good, that means if the soil bearing capacity is high, because it is inversely proportional, the size of the footing will be small, right?
Yeah.
And if the soil bearing capacity is low, that means if the figure is low, then the footing size will be high. Yeah. So we will end today at this level from what it looks like. Next time I need to present you a picture of how a frame structure works by way of footing, stub column, plinth beams and plinth. So I will take that up first thing next time. Yeah, as of now, you need to understand that an RCC footing is only the foundation to a column. It largely depends upon load and soil bearing capacities. It has nothing to do with the wall, and its size is largely depending on soil bearing capacity and loads here. And once the footing is cast, there is a stub column that comes to it. Next time we will carry forward from there onwards. Is there anybody that has any doubts?
I just want to say, like, time is also a factor. Like, if I have to dig the land for the foundation, doing it manually and doing it by machines,
Yes.
that would differ, no? So we need to specify even that, I guess.
You do not specify whether you'd want, except for that is for the contractor to decide what rate he's filling. You do not want him to, if he's going to but naturally use manual labor, he may code differently. If he's going to use a JCP or a mechanized way of digging, he's going to code differently. That
Like
is none of
I said,
unless you have two conditions. Suppose you have a two condition where he'd want to dig certain areas manually, where you have no option than to dig certain areas manually and certain areas by machine, then you give us two different items, no problem. But if you have one item expecting him to dig all throughout, then it is his. Like recently, I was doing a project where I allowed him to dig entirely using a JCP. But there was a compound wall which was between two properties, and I knew if he start digging there with a machine, the wall would collapse. So we had a separate item, as you rightly said, to be dug manually. Yeah. Other than that, usually it is expected that he will use machines. Today, very rarely are you in a position to dig huge ditches using manual labor. Unless the project is very small, then perhaps you would use, then you dig small footings in manual labor. Sometimes you design the footing so close by that you need to dig the entire area. So you have no option than to call a machine and dig it all and go away. But yes, please understand the kind of items that I'm covering is general. There can be more specified items further on. You need to understand how to go about it and how you need to write about it and what is the mode of measurement. You need to understand that there is a different rate to dig shallow. There is a different rate to dig deep. But naturally, to dig deep, I need mechanized machinery. Perhaps to dig shallow, as you rightly said, you could do it with manual labor. So, but naturally the rates would be different to dig shallow, to dig deep. And both their quantities are arranged by way of cubic meter. Yeah. Please understand, excavation may seem a small item, but it is a huge cost if you are not able to compute properly. Yeah. So is there any other query that I can take? It's already 1 o'clock.
Hello.
Yes, tell me.
I wanted to ask one last thing. One thing, that we write the bill of quantities different for concrete for different items because the shuttering is different, right?
Yes.
So that's the only thing which is different for like, because the concrete heading is the same, right? Like it's under concrete everything.
It will come under superstructure. Yes.
Yeah. So then like the concrete, like the quality of concrete is the same throughout, right? That doesn't differ.
Quality of concrete does not differ. The steel inside differs, but then steel is written as a separate item. So steel does not matter. It is largely the shuttering that matters. Like if I have stub columns are going to be very normal, right? So the rate is going to be less. Once that column comes above the ground, suppose that column becomes a circular column. The shuttering for a circular column is way different from a rectangular column. Suppose that column is a hexagonal column or a T-shaped column, yeah, or a triangular column. Then, but naturally the rate will be different because the contractor gathers that the amount of shuttering, the amount of labor just to cast this column is going to be a lot. He may quote differently, little, but whatsoever, he has the option of quoting differently. Because there are so many columns, he just can't quote randomly. So he'll look at the drawing, he'll see, oh my God, he's got some circular columns, he's got some rectangular columns. Are you getting it?
Yeah, so the rate of shuttering and labor is different, but concrete, like when you buy concrete, that is the same.
No dear. The rate for concrete is inclusive of shuttering and labor.
But rate of concrete won't differ if the shuttering is different.
अरे
right?
मैडम, it is inclusive. आप चाय पीते हैं तो शक्कर का रेट, चाय पत्ती का रेट, दूध का रेट अलग थोड़ी के देते हैं, चाय का रेट देते हैं ना. हेलो.
Okay, all right.
Are you getting it? Are you getting it? आप अगर चाय वाले को बोलते हैं कि शक्कर ज्यादा डालो तो वो शक्कर का पैसा थोड़ी के अलग से ले रहा है. वो क्या बोलता है, मैडम 5 रुपया ज्यादा होएगा चाय का, बराबर है क्या नहीं मैडम? अगर आप बर्गर में चीज ज्यादा डालने को कहते हो तो चीज का पैसा अलग नहीं रहता है, बर्गर का रेट बढ़ाता है.
Okay.
वैसा कंक्रीट का ओवरऑल रेट बढ़ेगा. You are right, the concrete quality may be the same. Concrete quality usually remains the same, but depending upon shuttering and labor, yeah, the rates in the and hence next time we have only come to footing concrete. We have not even discussed. We have not yet discussed stub column. We have not yet discussed plinth beams. So next time onwards, we will discuss every item in the concrete separately, because every item specification is going to be written differently. He should know what he is quoting for. He should know whether he's quoting for columns. He should know whether he's quoting for beams, beams, cantilever slabs, staircases, any other features, louvers, louvers, concrete louvers. They look all very sexy, all nice, thin, sleek. To shutter them, brick difficulty. Yeah. Suppose you have exposed concrete walls, then he'll charge you separately for exposed concrete walls, because he knows that an exposed concrete wall is bound to have certain features embedded in them. So you are but naturally going to, in the drawing, clearly showing that I have an exposed concrete wall that has grooves there, that has bolts clearly shown, that have the shuttering marks, but naturally he has to then design or the shuttering accordingly. It's as good as designing the shuttering before he pours the concrete. Is this clear, madam?
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah. So item wise he'll write differently. There is sometimes what happens, I'll tell you. Sometimes he quotes something really out of the blue, he'll quote for a particular item, shuttering for a particular wall, exposed concrete wall, some huge amount, which is not comparable to the other figures. Then an architect asks from the contractor what is something called as rate analysis. So the architect will ask him, how have you come across this rate? This rate is huge. There seems to be a problem. Then he said, no sir, there is not a problem. If you look at it, मेरे को इतने में ही पड़ता है. You'll say, then give me a rate analysis. The rate analysis, then as you rightly say, he'll write everything separately. Concrete का rate इतना, labor बढ़ रहा है इतना, shuttering बढ़ रहा है इतना, my profit margin इतना, taxes इतना, rate इतना. Are you clear?
Yeah.
Anybody else? Anything else? Anybody else? Any other query? Till we get next time to looking at. So next time we'll look at the superstructure. I'll preferably put up an image of a framed building so that you understand what is plinth beams. So we'll talk about internal and external plinth beams, which I'm sure you are not very clear about since you have stressed a lot on load bearing. And then we'll continue with our superstructure and specification writing further on. If there are no queries, thank you for the day. I've taken the attendance. We shall meet next Monday. I hope it was convenient to start at 11:30, though I would have preferred starting at 11. Did your class end early or did it end as late? So it was convenient to join in at 11:30, or could we join next time at 11? You please let me know that.
11:30 is better because usually the morning class ends late.
Late means what late? Late has a time, no beta? What is the late?
So sometimes they drag on till 10:45 or even till 11.
Okay, fine. So 11:30 is good enough for now. A 1.5 hour lecture we'll cover, at least this is the amount that we are covering. Yeah, I hope today's class is clear to everybody. As we move every time you need to sit in a class with a notebook, as we're going to write specification, we're going to write the modes of computer, the modes of measurement. We'll move further. We should cover most of the material specifications during the lockdown, yeah, such that when we meet we can discuss other things. Okay, if we are done for the day, no queries. Are there any queries in the chat box that I need to cover, or Neeraj, have you done the needful? Are the guidelines for salt content universal? For instance, is there an issue in areas where there is not much rain? No dear, salt content requirement is the same. Yeah, but it is not measurable. The sad part is that how much salt should be there is not measurable. Yeah, usually on brick they say that when you dip brick in water, it should not have more than 30% of efflorescence seen on the top of the brick. But that is all very subjective and not very objective. Yeah. So salt content, the lower it is, the better it is. Yeah, that can only be monitored, or that can only be controlled through monitored production or monitored manufacturing in items like brick. In sand, that can be reduced to a very large extent by washing of sand or depending on other mediums of sand. Yeah, Nishanti, I hope I've clarified. Good day, thank you. We'll meet next Monday. Neeraj, is there anything particular you want to say?
No, sir. I think that's it.
Okay, see you all. Yeah, we are also working on trying to introduce you composite construction methods, considering your IDS studio is going to work with part load bearing, part frame. So we are looking at projects where we can introduce you in composite methods. By the end of the month, we should have a presentation to present that. Yeah, just before the college reopens. I hope you all are all intending to come back to college sooner than later, as things look to be now sooner or later in control. I urge you all also to take the opportunity and pay the fees. Yeah, as the college is also gearing up to get it sanitized and get the studios in place. Yeah, we'll meet next time. Thank you. Good day. Take care.
Thank you.